Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast, presented in part by our official partner, StubHub. Take a night off from Nights In. Visit steelcityunderground.com/tickets for more information. My name is Joe Kuzma. I am one half of your hosts on this show, which means my co-host, Brian E. Roach, is back and better than ever before. What's going on, Brian?
It's a lovely day in South Jersey in the rain. Even though it's raining, it's still lovely.
You know, I got lots and lots of sun. I had a nice extended. I'll tell you what, that 4th of July thing being in the middle of the week just threw off everything. I mean, people blow off fireworks whenever they want. Anyhow, it's annoying. It drives me crazy. I meant to talk with Mitch about some of that the other day, but we were too fixated on pro wrestling, and that ship has sailed. We're done talking about that. I think we're going to beat the dead horse on quarterbacks again. But before we get to that, just speaking about, like, I'm flaking. I was red. I'm like a lobster. I'm like the quarterback jerseys that the Steelers don't use. They don't care. They hit Ben like a piñata, you know. But my wife had to go get these. Get extra. Had me go, of course. She didn't go, and I had to run down to the local, drugstore and buy some extra case of water. So we had enough for all of our guests with all of these different things going on, the extended weekends, the extra days off, blah 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 blah. And as we're ready to do this, and I said, you know what, I'm going to record this because I was talking about this off the air. I'm opening a bottle of water, not one of these drinks, not to be mentioned, that just they don't care to sponsor us, so they don't get mentioned. But the water, I go to put it here on my desk, and the thing is like a leaning tower of Pisa. It's what do they do with these plastic bottles that makes them so deformed and they can't stay upright? I mean, you would think this thing was Drew Bledsoe. So
that's that recyclable plastic, that new eco-friendly plastic that's very wimpy. My Poland Spring bottles are made of the same stuff. And when they get cold, they get a little lopsided. And the first time I ever noticed it, I set it on the table. I thought, all right, I'm going to sit here for a nice dinner, putting my bottle of water on the table, and plop. All of a sudden, the water really was on the table.
Oh man, I tell you, you would think I left this thing out in the sun, like in the windshield or the back window of my car, and it just got like deformed or something. And it's nothing of that case. But anyways, we're going from water, and who some people think should be a water boy, Landry Jones, will be discussed today. You know, we talked about the backup running back situation. We've definitely talked about quarterbacks a lot on this show, but it never ceases to amaze me that when something gets posted on social media, and I post a lot on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you're not following us, I know thousands that are out there. I get these comments every so often, and it just gets under my skin how people cannot acknowledge, or just maybe it's just short-term memory. Maybe they weren't alive for that period of time and they're newer Steelers fans, but you could certainly do worse than Landry Jones. Oh, man, people are already coming at me. I couldn't even finish saying it, Brian. I could already see it. The target's on my back. Joe's going to talk about Landry again. Actually, I'm going to talk about everybody else besides Landry and then compare some numbers. And unfortunately, sorry, Charlie, this isn't going to be a very good show for Charlie Batch, who near and dear to our hearts, a Pittsburgh guy through and through that we love, but he had his own struggles and, what do you want to say? Oh, some performances that weren't so great.
Which is fair enough. I mean, the truth is, once anybody becomes a backup, there's a reason they're a backup. As we've said over and over and over again, you know, when you're a backup quarterback, it's really because you aren't capable of being a starting quarterback, or at least you haven't shown anywhere that you are. And when you talk about guys like Byron Leftwich and Charlie Batch, who were starters elsewhere, but came to us at the ends of their careers, they that's what their role was. That was why they were brought here, to be the savvy veteran quarterback. And the interesting thing is when they drafted Landry, of course, they drafted him not to become a starter, but instead of getting these veteran quarterbacks who, when the wind blew too hard, or when, a defensive lineman touched them, they got hurt. And now we're back to our third string quarterback because the second string quarterback is hurt. They wanted a younger, more fit, I guess, less damaged individual to be the backup. So they drafted Landry to be the backup. And I think that we'll see that's kind of been a benefit for them.
Yeah, and you know what? Even to the point of there have been a number of names. There's only been 6 guys in Pittsburgh who have taken a snap during Ben Roethlisberger's reign since he was drafted in 2004. And it's funny. I was just listening to that on the radio, too, just listening to go back to the draft class with Big Ben and Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers, and you really have to go back to that because no one else has lived up to this class thus far. You have some attempts. You're going to have people talking about Derek Carr, who's still we talked about that not too long ago as well. Maybe Cam Newton and then Andrew Luck came along, and even Cam Newton's had a better career than Andrew Luck so far, and Andrew Luck hasn't been very healthy. So you look at the top guys that are taken, and we've said this many times, they don't necessarily pan out or not guaranteed to be these great quarterbacks. Lo and behold, Patrick Mahomes, Mitchell Trubisky, not guaranteed for greatness. And there was a great conversation about this the other day on the XM radio that I'm always listening to. I think it was Ross Tucker talking about it. And he was talking about the kid, I think, from USC and whether or not, I think he has 3 years of eligibility left. And it's could he come out in a year? Could he come out in 2? Will he stay all 3? Depends what teams are available to draft him, blah, blah, blah. Or if you're another team, let's say the Jets. Everyone right now thinks the Jets have the worst 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. They have Josh McCown, they have Bryce Petty, and Christian Hackenberg. And Hackenberg hasn't had an opportunity to do anything yet. We already know who McCown is, and Petty didn't look very sharp at all last year. And they were discussing whether or not they might make a go at Kirk Cousins if he becomes a free agent with the Washington Redskins for next year. I mean, really, this crystal ball stuff, folks, if you think we're reaching for things to talk about, just listen to their show once or twice during the offseason, especially about a month after the draft. I mean, they're really reaching for some things. So we're talking about guys who potentially may not even enter the NFL draft for 2 or 3 years, and whether or not a team would have a better luck at Kirk Cousins. And one of the things that made sense to me, there's a catch-22 to this, 2 sides of the blade, if you will. If I think Sam Darnold, how do you say his name? Darnold?
I think that's right. Yeah.
If he comes out, he will be less expensive than having to pay Kirk Cousins $30 million. Because, that's where the bar is set right now with Derek Carr's contract. But Kirk Cousins has shown he is a mostly competent, capable NFL quarterback who has seen NFL defenses and has X amount of starting experience, attempts, yada, yada, yada. Is it worth paying more for the guy who has experience, or is it worth taking a risk with maybe what might be a top pick or the top pick of the NFL draft on a guy who hasn't thrown a pass yet?
It's a good question, and if you were to look at it dispassionately, if these guys who run these teams and try to run them as businesses and businessmen were to be a little less new shiny toy-ish, then I think the answer would be you'd pay for the commodity that's proven. However, that new shiny toy concept just appears. Ooh, a new quarterback. We need to get him. My guess would be that they're going to draft the quarterback, but that doesn't mean that's what they should have done. Now, with a guy like Cousins, it's tough. He's, as you said, capable, somewhat dependable, but he hasn't proven to be a winner yet. He hasn't proven that he can get them deep into the playoffs. He hasn't proven that he can get them consistently into the playoffs. So, for somebody that they're always going to look at the grass is greener on the other side. And if this kid from USC does come out, it wouldn't surprise me, depending, of course, on the year. I mean, we're speculating. If this kid comes out, there's already been hype about him from before this year's draft. And if he does come out next year and come out early, then, who's to say the Redskins have a cruddy enough pick to get him, or a high enough pick? They have that bad a year. It looks, it's really is a kind of a crapshoot. Who's going to be the surprise flop team that has a chance at this guy?
Yeah, and we've seen this with the Houston Texans. They're just a revolving door there. Brian Hoyer, Brock Osweiler, trying to go after something that's a proven commodity. And where this is all going to tie in with the Steelers' backups here is obviously Landry Jones, because Osweiler didn't have a whole lot of starts or anything either. Now they're going to go and they're going to try with their own fourth-round pick, I believe, Phil Savage, year or two back, Tom Savage. I'm sorry, Phil Savage is the executive. Tom Savage. And Tom, he took over for Osweiler and was miserable, and they actually had to bring Osweiler back to start because he was just not that good. And then you're going to hope that Watson is something better than both of those guys. Nothing guaranteed. Osweiler just had like a handful of starts, and that's all the more Jimmy Garoppolo really has too. And if you take his numbers and put them up against, let's say, Landry Jones, you have 63 attempts, 68.25% completion percentage for Garoppolo, versus if you take Landry Jones and he has 141 attempts, 60.3 completion. Okay, Landry has 1,071 yards, 6 TDs, or 7 TDs, 6 interceptions, and an 82.8 quarterback rating, and he technically has 4 starts under his belt. Well, that's really all the more that Jimmy G has here in New England. He's only started 2 games. He's kind of appeared in 17 if you take statistics. Sometimes that's victory formations or closing out the game, just handing the ball off a few times. I mean, he only threw 4 passes in all of 2015, but he's only thrown for like half as many yards almost as Landry Jones has. 690, has 5 touchdowns. Okay, he hasn't thrown a pick. But then again, the few teams that he did play against, okay, Miami Dolphins, that was his big game, 3 touchdowns. What did Ben do to the Dolphins last year? Well, we saw one game where he was absolutely terrible, and that's probably because he, got his knee knocked out from his knee. And then the wild card game where they absolutely just blew the roof open on the Dolphins. So now, I'm going to get a lot of hate for comparing Jimmy Garoppolo to Landry Jones, but just think about the 2 systems those guys are in. And when we get into some of these past backups that have been behind Ben and what they've done, you might get a better feel or understanding for the support system that Jones's has. I just don't see why he gets as much hate as he does.
Yeah, I want to say something about Jimmy G here. Jimmy G gets the benefit of this mystique it's the Tom Brady mystique. Ooh, they drafted Tom Brady late in the draft, and wahaha, that means they know all quarterbacks. Matt Castle was going to be the great savior of some team. Guess what? He wasn't. Now it's Garoppolo. He's going to be the guy that everybody needs to trade for. And the reason they're not giving him up is because he's just that good. There's no proof of that. There's no evidence of that. There's nothing to say that's true. It's the mystique that Belichick knows how to draft quarterbacks or players. It's a bunch of hooey. Now, that being said, why does Landry get hate? Well, as I've said before, I'm not necessarily a Landry lover, but I'm not a Landry hater either. I think Landry is in the position he's supposed to be in. But the thing is, Landry doesn't help himself in a variety of ways. And if you just look at his on-the-field stuff, it's fine, right? It's what we would expect from a backup quarterback, and maybe even slightly better than some backup quarterbacks. It's the post-game plaid shirt, lumberjack-looking doofus that then comes across, and you're like, we have a goober as our backup, and that doesn't help him.
It's true though. I hate to take like just the outward appearance, but you know what? You combine that with some bad preseason games, which many other quarterbacks have had some bad ones. In his own class, Ryan Nassib with the New York Giants was also pretty bad, and he has not developed whatsoever. That's why Geno Smith's there now. So, Landry just gives off that appearance as just like, hey guys, I'm here. What's this brown thing that's made out of pigskin? You know, like
it's absolutely true, and. I think that doesn't help him because it gets this perception of gooberishness, and then you don't have that level of trust. You want the confidence. You want they want everybody to be Ben or somebody like Ben, and they're not. And the difference between Landry and people like Charlie Batch or Brian Leftwich or even Gradkowski is they've been there long enough. They've been in the game more years than he has, even up to this point, and they have the savvy to create that persona of confidence, and so people think it's okay. But Landry kind of doesn't yet, and maybe he'll get it, and maybe he won't. I don't know. I'm not stating that Landry Jones should change the way he is or dresses or appears, but it is not helpful to his overall persona.
He's going to show up with some aviator glasses and a Michael Jackson glove next just to impress you, Brian. And he does wear gloves. Won't. Oh, man. People they get on everybody with everything. Even Ben. Oh, why is Ben throwing with gloves? And everybody knows better than the guys that are actually doing this. And we're not absolved of that whatsoever. But there are 6 players who have backed up Ben, Jones being one of them. The only other guy that was drafted and got an opportunity to play, he appeared in 4 games, was Dennis Dixon, and he only threw 59 passes, 59.3 completion percentage, 1 TD, 2 picks, 71.4 rating, 402 yards. Dixon was not very strong. Everybody else has been a veteran, and you had actually mentioned Bruce Gradkowski. Bruce, I think, threw 3 passes in a playoff game and then got hurt 2 training camps or preseasons in a row. Never got to see what Bruce Gradkowski could do in a Steelers uniform. So he is not part of the number of 6 guys that we have here. The very first one, of course, is who Ben took the job from, and that's the Tommy gun, Tommy Maddox, my favorite number 8 of all time. Here's a guy I'd get equally flamed because if I were doing this same show like maybe about a dozen or 15 years ago, I would probably be carrying the flag for Tommy Maddox too. I loved him. Everybody knows that now from the last episode that I'm a pro wrestling guy. Well, Tommy played in Vince McMahon's XFL, and he was the MVP of it and led the Los Angeles Extreme to a championship after floundering around and he was not capable of being John Elway's heir in Denver. And I guess the rumor is that he basically got like a freebie tryout with the Pittsburgh Steelers and stuck on and lucked his way into a job after backing up Cordell Stewart. Had maybe one marginally okay season, which was still held up, as we're going to see with most of these quarterbacks, by an outstanding defense that just stopped the run when, before the NFL became so pass heavy, and could get after the quarterback and didn't allow points and et cetera, et cetera. But Maddox just 15-20-1 as a starter in Pittsburgh, and he just had he had a monumental decline. He went from 62.1% completion to 57.4, 50 on the nose, and 47.9. He dipped from TD interception ratio from 18-17, 1-2, 2-4. Oh, I missed the 20 and 16 was the first one. Sorry. And his quarterback rating just went from about 85-ish, 75-ish, 58, and 51. I mean, it just took a nosedive. And after they won that first Super Bowl with Ben, Super Bowl 40, Tommy was gone. I mean, he wanted that big contract. I remember it wasn't really a holdout, but there was a big stink about that. And they went and drafted Ben Roethlisberger, and Tommy's days were done in Pittsburgh.
Yep. And, the thing, like, as you said, he had one marginally good year. The thing is that came after seasons of in very bad quarterback play.
Oh, boy.
And And, because Cordell was sort of the same way. Cordell had a couple solid years, but he also played poorly. And when he went off, he kind of went off. His decline was not slow. But Tommy came in and sort of rescued the franchise by basically being better than anybody thought he was going to be. He had that gunslinger persona. They went deep. They were the comeback kids, the cardiac kids. It wasn't like they were killing people. You know what I mean? It was tight games because it just was. But he had that aura around him for that one season, and that carried him. And because we have selective memory, which we're going to talk about more. But we get enamored of things because one good thing happens, and we think this is the way it will always be with us and Tommy forever and ever. But it's not.
And they couldn't get over the hump with Slash under center. I mean, what was it? 2 AFC championship games that they lost with Cordell Stewart as the quarterback. I think he got really, really, really roasted for the one game where he threw a pick or two or whatever, had some turnovers, just going off some fuzzy memory here. And in between there, I want to say they experimented with let's see. I think Mike Tomczak got some time. Kent Graham was a guy they brought in that was supposed to be his big free agent acquisition, and he was just nothing of anything but a big failure, really. And you moved on to Maddox, and then Maddox moved on to Ben, and then you have a few guys that got to fill in there. I mentioned Dennis Dixon, who was kind of the same type of developmental quarterback as Landry Jones was never meant to be anything more than a backup for Big Ben. And before we get to Charlie Batch and our very rosy memory of Charlie, there was Byron Leftwich, who came to Pittsburgh, left, maybe went to Tampa or something, and then came back yet again and really wanted Byron Leftwich. I'll never forget, I think it was 2012. I think that's the one game where Jacoby Jones ran back a touchdown like October, November in Heinz Field. We had to settle with Byron Leftwich as the quarterback, and he had a wide open receiver. I can't remember who it was at this moment. Maybe it was Mike Wallace even.
Could have been.
And he just couldn't get the ball. I mean, it dropped like 10 yards before it even reached the intended receiver. Wide open. Would have been the game winner there. It was a very painful experience to watch, and Leftwich didn't necessarily have the, what do you want to say, great career in Pittsburgh. I mean, he really only started one game. He made some other, that was the one game, I believe. He made some relief appearances, barely completed 50% of his 96 pass attempts, about 53.1. He did throw for 2 touchdowns, had 1 pick, 75.7 rating. I'm going to say most of that is anchored by the fact that they absolutely destroyed, I think it was Eric Mangini's Cleveland Browns in his season finale up in Cleveland, where they were up 14-0 in the first quarter. There was a Troy Polamalu pick 6, and Leftwich came in maybe the end of the third quarter, early fourth quarter, and was still marching the team around, and it was just like, as it usually is in Cleveland, it was a Pittsburgh party.
Yeah. The thing is, like you said, Leftwich didn't have a lot of opportunities, which was probably a good thing. Dixon didn't have a lot of opportunities, but he was drafted to be a backup, and it never really jibed. It never really felt like they knew exactly how to use Dennis Dixon, which is not tremendously surprising. They wanted him to sort of be that Slash kind of guy, but they also wanted him to be a pocket passer. He was a very athletic guy, but maybe not the greatest quarterback. But as a backup, he might have provided them some different opportunities for things. Just didn't work. And I think he got hurt at one point as well, and he wasn't really the same after the injury as before. And then there's Charlie that, we have rose-colored glasses often when we remember Charlie Batch.
And we got one more guy before Charlie Batch. It's almost eerily creepy that Byron Leftwich, Dennis Dixon, and Michael Vick all have about the same kind of, well, Leftwich a much worse completion percentage, but Vick was hovering in the 60% range too. Only had 66 pass attempts, Dixon 59, Leftwich 96. Vic threw for the least amount of yards, all of them, had a couple touchdowns, a sub 80 rating as a QB. Obviously, those of us who suffered through the few games that Michael Vick did play. Now, I understand he threw the one deep pass to Marcus Wheaton and got the Steelers on the doorstep for that great last-second Le'Veon Bell touchdown in San Diego. But outside of that, there's not very many good memories there. And I remember more defensive backs dropping the lasers that he was throwing as passes, as opposed even AB. When Antonio Brown can't catch a pass from you, there's definitely a problem. At least Antonio could catch passes from Landry Jones, at least when Landry's not overthrowing them. So, but yeah, Charlie Batch is this is almost going to feel like the Charlie Batch roast fest, and that's not what I intend this to be. But I have a list of games that Charlie significantly played in or was the starter. Now, his career numbers, believe it or not, if I go through this, is literally take Landry Jones's numbers and just double them. Just legitimately double them. That's the other strange thing. Would anyone believe that when Charlie came from Detroit, where he was a so-so starter, that what were you really expecting from him as a free agent coming from the Lions? I don't know about you, Brian, but I didn't have the highest of expectations, but yet it seems like he's definitely become a beloved figure in the city, as opposed to, I'm sure nobody in Detroit cares to even mention his name anymore.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch Batch play on some Sundays, and even then when he was in Detroit, I don't think they thought Charlie Batch was going to be the starter for them for any length of time. But he was gritty. He had that kind of let me stick my nose in there kind of attitude that won over some people, right? But so when he comes to Pittsburgh, I don't recall there being a grand hoorah or this is the guy that's going to be the greatest backup ever. I also don't recall anybody saying he's horrible and this is a bad mistake. I just think nobody knew what to expect. And the bottom line was we should have been pretty certain that we were getting a guy who was going to be a backup.
But there wasn't guys that were out there saying stuff to the effect of, oh, I hate him, he's a bum, and we need to get rid of him. And if anything, they tried to get rid of him a few times, and it just didn't work out. I mean, he got to play to what? He was like 40 when he called it quits. Maybe he was like 38, 39, but he was approaching 40 years old. And just to go back on that, the double numbers thing, if you take Landry Jones, 141 pass attempts, Batch 278. Now, Batch appeared in 33 games and Jones 16. So almost exactly double the games for Charlie Batch, almost double the pass attempts here because it would be 282 to 278 if we doubled Landry's. Completion percentage for Charlie a little less, 59.4 to 60.3. And Charlie's also thrown for almost 1,000 more yards, okay, almost double. And then touchdowns, 12 to 7. Almost double once again. And then interceptions, 12 to 6. So he's thrown as many touchdowns as interceptions, and that's just like Jones. So it's 12 and 12, and Jones is 7 and 6. Charlie's QB rating 79, Jones 82.8 by virtue of one less interception, of course. If he had a 7 and 7, it would probably be dead on the nose even at 79 or 80 there. So it's a very interesting thing, and when I go through some of these games, you realize some of the stuff that happened. There was a game in 2005 where the Steelers beat the Packers, and Charlie goes 9 of 16 for 65 yards, no touchdowns, an interception, 39.8 rating. Troy Polamalu returns a fumble, 77 yards in that game. Most people may not remember that. That's over a decade ago now. He beat the Browns, 13 of 19, 150 yards, no TDs, no interceptions. He gets a 92 rating for that, by the way, completing 13 passes, not giving the ball away, not scoring. He actually ran one in on a QB sneak, and then Randall L. is the one who threw a touchdown pass in that game.
Yeah.
So,
the thing about Batch is he is remembered for the one win, right, over the Ravens. But we forget he also had 2 losses to the Ravens. That, you're talking where he was a 50.9 rating quarterback, a 69 rating quarterback, 2 interceptions in one of those games. It was, the when I said rose-colored glasses, this is what I mean. We remember the few good victories, but we forget the bad losses.
Yeah, he had a big win against the Dolphins. He threw 25 attempts, completed 15 of them, 209, 3 TDs, no picks, 126.5 rating. That was back in September 2006. I hate saying it like that, 2006. And then, of course, his next games were the whole Ravens thing. He entered the fourth quarter for the one game, and it was just bad. 4 of 11, 49 yards. He couldn't get anything generated. One of these, Ben actually, I think, just left the game and got benched because it was such a bad game. And then other ones were due to injury, such as when they beat the Titans in 2010. He actually entered for Dennis Dixon in the second quarter. You tend to forget that Charlie Batch wasn't the guy meant to play during Ben's suspension there, where he had 4 games. They actually were going to play Dennis Dixon, and Dixon gets hurt, and Charlie goes 5 of 11 for 25 yards, which was bad. It was 4 Jeff Reed field goals in that game, and Antonio Brown returned a punt for a touchdown. And then Charlie actually had a big game not too long after that, where they beat up the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but still 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 186 yards. He only attempted 17 passes and completed a dozen of them. If you're going to take a quote from Charlie Batch directly, and somebody had asked him this, he had said something to the effect of, I wasn't Ben Roethlisberger, and no one is Ben Roethlisberger, meaning no one ever will be Ben Roethlisberger. So you should at least take in stride, and there's the rest of these are some really bad Charlie Batch games too. I mean, there was 57.8 rating, 49.1, 38.7. That was the bad Browns game I always talk about from 2012, where he threw 3 picks. And then the one where he beat the Ravens was the 89.6. That was the most attempts he's thrown in a game was 36, 276 yards. That was following that game where there was like 8 turnovers against Cleveland.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that's what colors us, because it's one of the last games he had. Nobody expected us to win. Everyone expected us to get destroyed because of how badly we played the week before with Cleveland, and he pulls it out, right? But even then, it's an 89.6 rating, which is decent. 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He did enough, right? But because that's the last thing I think that stuck with us. There's this love affair that has grown around Charlie Batch. And Charlie Batch is a great guy, and I like Charlie Batch. I think he does great things for the city. He's fun to listen to after the games on Steelers Nation Radio, and he's a proponent and a good ambassador for the team, and always has been. So, but the idea that, gosh, if only we had a backup quarterback like Charlie Batch, is that has become cemented in the narrative of the Steelers. Is a false narrative. It's just not accurate.
Yeah, and it was stellar defense. And I know somebody's going to bring this up and say, well, you know what? Landry Jones, he has Antonio Brown, and for a period of time he has Martavis Bryant. And, well, Charlie had, for a spell, Plaxico Burress, Hines Ward, Mike Wallace, Emmanuel Sanders, Antonio Brown himself. So it's not as though Heath Miller, he wasn't lacking any sort of weaponry here. It's just the fact that, and like I said, we know that Charlie's meant to be a backup. Nobody was advocating for Charlie Batch to be a starter ever over Ben Roethlisberger, and most of his opportunities came due to injury or resting guys, and he had to fight and get the opportunities that he did. And granted, I think maybe he may have done better if he were the starter over Dennis Dixon or Byron Leftwich in some of those instances, but then we look at some of this stuff and realize, well, maybe not. And this is just the life of an NFL backup quarterback. These guys sometimes are coming in cold, as Charlie did for a couple of these games that we rattled off here. And it wasn't meant, don't take this the wrong way. We're not trying to say Landry Jones walks on water either. Landry Jones is literally half the guy of Charlie Batch right now. If you give Landry Jones the defense that we think the Steelers are going to have going forward, there's no reason to think that he can't at least manage a game in an emergency situation should he be called upon.
Yeah, I mean, he's shown that, right? He's shown that he can. Yes, he's made mistakes, and again, it's kind of like, the last thing you taste is what you remember, right? So the last taste of Landry really that we've gotten may not have been the best taste. We still are probably stewing, even though we won the game with Ben coming back, we're still stewing about Landry walks in after Ben gets hurt and throws a pick to the Bengals in that playoff game. That sticks in people's craw, and they can't let it go. But again, it's a playoff game, and he's a backup quarterback. He's going against a defense that's doing very well. It was, he blew that. There's no question about it. But he's coming in cold. You know what I mean? So it's tough to get past, I think, those kinds of images and the combination with his own public persona and how he presents himself to get the confidence in Landry that I think would be needed. But he is exactly what he's supposed to be, and I don't, there's a lot of projection that Josh Dobbs is going to beat him out of the number 2 role this year. That's not going to happen. I think people need to stop with that kind of speculation because it simply isn't going to happen. Landry has 4 years in this offense. He knows this offense probably as well as Ben knows the offense. Josh Dobbs does not.
I see Josh as being more the athletic type of quarterback that Dennis Dixon or Michael Vick or Byron Leftwich was. And I don't really know. I can't ascertain to his maybe accuracy. What bits of film that I've seen in college looks more like his receivers let him down more than anything. So statistics don't tell the entire story. It'll be interesting to see him out there. He's got a cannon for an arm and he can extend plays. So he also reminds me of Roethlisberger in some regard. But even for the rocket scientist, you could learn the playbook. He may know it already, cover to cover, because he's an intelligent guy.
Yeah.
However, he has to put that into practice. You could be book smart, but you also have to be street smart when you're playing in the National Football League. So this entire thing about just kind of highlighting the past experience of Charlie Batch wasn't so much to drag Charlie down and drag his name through the mud. Like Brian said, I'm a big fan of what Charlie does for the community and how he handled himself over the years. It's just to show that our expectations of backup quarterbacks or anybody not named Ben Roethlisberger should be brought down way, 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 way low. So
low.
Yeah. So you know what, Brian? I think that's a good spot to leave it off for today because we talk about backup quarterbacks quite a bit, but now we had a little bit of facts behind our just rambling about the position.
Absolutely. Again, I think your statement is exactly right. We need to be realistic in what we expect out of the guys who are really there to be backups. They're not there to be projected starters at any point in time. And if anything, they signed Landry to 2 more years?
Yeah. So he's still under contract through 2018.
Yeah, and I think now you've got another young guy behind Landry who they basically have said, here's 2 years to see how you develop. And in 2 more years, those people who want Landry gone might get their wish. But they might not. It depends on how Dobbs progresses.
Yeah, and they could certainly draft another guy or maybe a veteran that they really like. Maybe somebody that was on a draft board they watched film of before, taken higher than what they were willing to risk a pick on, becomes available, and he's brought into the fold. You just, it's just something that's really a non-issue going into 2017 unless I can't say it. I don't even want to knock on wood. We won't say it. We won't say it. We will not.
It's not an issue.
We also didn't mention he whose name should not be mentioned, and we probably won't. And that wasn't a TB and not Terry Bradshaw from the last episode, but that was an ND, a guy who threw some picks in a Super Bowl against the Dallas Cowboys. So maybe we'll peruse that at a later date. And because I can't quite get into the conversation about how maybe he's not as bad as I want him to be in my memory because I may throw up in my mouth. Yeah, but there once again, last game that he played as a Pittsburgh Steeler still sits in your craw right there. So
absolutely does.
It's the one you can't let go. And you know what? And Landry had an all-okay game against the Patriots, too. He certainly wasn't the reason why they lost to them during the regular season. So we'll let it off there. If you have hate mail to send us, people, you can send it to our email at fanmail@steelcityunderground.com or send your hateful, spiteful text messages about how we're completely stupid, dumb, and wrong, and totally too optimistic about everything, to 203-900-4728. Until next time, my name's Joe. His name's Brian. I'd say party on, but we've used that one already. So be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.